Okay, there are some individuals removed from the meeting because the recording has started. It is due to a technical arrangement in the Google Meet. Those removed individuals, Ms. Ramoso and Ms. Priscillas, can join again or can re-enter the Google Meet because the recording has started. Again, a pleasant afternoon to everyone. I know that some areas are being affected by a bad weather condition. Let us pray for better days and better weather conditions, for better weather conditions that will be coming to us. If you are affected by the rain, and I know some signals are not good, I hope you will be able to catch up with the lesson by viewing the recording of this session. By the way, I hope you are all, or you were all, able to take the exam. I am still in the process of checking the essay portion or the part 2. And I hope you also found the exam fair enough and good enough. I hope you were not able to find it difficult. Now, for this afternoon, there is already a quote presented prior or earlier from the slides you are viewing right now. Can I request some volunteers to read and perhaps give his or her explanation or thoughts on the quote presented? Please utilize the raise hand button. Okay, Mr. Ramirez, would you like to share something?
Yes, sir. Okay, so the quote came from the Irish proverb, you'll never plow a field by turning it in your mind. So, my own understanding about this quotation is that you need to take action, not just by simply thinking or strategizing about something. Because for me, ideas should be not just conceptualized, but should be done manually, or that we should make actions towards our ideas in order to make it a reality. Because if it stays in our mind always, we can just conjure up a lot more happenings, but at the same time, if you cannot do these things at the actual world or in our realm, then it is all for nothing.
Okay, thank you for that sharing. Yes, action is the essential thing rather than just conjuring something. Again, you'll never plow a field by turning it over in your mind. Plow. Yes, Miss Lusdok, would you like to share something?
Yes, sir. Words without action is nothing. In order to achieve our goals and plans, we need to take actions or steps and efforts upang makamit natin ang rurok ng tagumpay. Hindi naman pwedeng umani tayo ng palay nang hindi nagbubungkal ng lupa at hindi nagtanim. And another example is me and my classmates, the BSED students. Before demonstration, we plan everything in our mind. We have a very beautiful imagination about our demonstration. But in reality, outside our imagination, we just do nothing and say, "Bahala na si Lord." Most of the students are saying like that, or yung mga ginagawa nila ay talagang wala sa kanilang plano. Yan lang po, sir.
Thank you so much, Miss Lusdok. Yes, planning is just one part of the whole scenario, but planning must not stay at planning. It should be with action it should be manifested. We have another similar quote also here. Who wants to read this for us and perhaps give his or her thoughts about this? Who wants to share on this second thought or second quote? Yes, Miss Sabal, would you like to answer? You were raising your hand earlier. But I think your signal is not good, Miss Sabal. Maybe you can turn off your microphone. If you want to answer, maybe you can just type in the Google chat box, in the Google Meet chat box. Perhaps there is something that interferes with your signal. While you are typing, can I request someone? Shall I call someone who wants to volunteer? Those who have answered already, please give chance to others. Do not monopolize the conversation. Okay, what about Mr. Avante? Oh, Mr. Avante, are you around? Not anymore. What about Mr. Rivas? Yes, Mr. Rivas.
So you'll never pull a soul by putting it over in your Irish proverb. It means that he has something in his mind which he cannot tell or cannot share with you, but it's important to do so. And also, once you decided on the best way to do it, you have to actually go and do it. So hindi tayo magtagumpay sa ating ginagawa kung wala tayong action sa ating sarili. That's all, sir.
Okay, thank you, Rio. I think we have here Ms. Sabal's interpretation or thoughts on the quote. She says, it has something to do with the other saying, walk the talk. You have to act what you are saying because what you have done measures who you are. Actions always speak louder than words. Okay, thank you so much for those who shared for our two quotes this afternoon. Indeed, actions speak louder than words. And it's not enough that we think and plan, but most importantly, we do, or we implement, or we actualize what we have thought about or what we have planned. In line with our curriculum development course, we then now proceed to our topic or discussion on implementing the curriculum daily in the classrooms. Remember that when we have already designed and aligned our curriculum map, the curriculum map which is anchored to our prescribed or written or standard, what I mean is standard curriculum, then we need to bridge that one from the idea level, the conceptual level towards the actual. The actualization of that is in the implementation in the classroom on a day-to-day basis. Remember, we are given this role as a curricularist, as curriculum experts, because we as teachers translate the ideas, the frameworks of the curriculum that we have into the tangible or foreseeable aspects in the delivery of curriculum inside our classrooms. So as we are saying that when we deliver the curriculum, because we are the frontline service providers in the education aspect, we would like to implement whatever it is that we have planned. So conducting or implementing the curriculum at the classroom level necessitates the teacher to be the most important or essential, okay, service provider. Now, before that curriculum is implemented in the classroom, we have to make sure that we have written and planned carefully whatever it is that we have implemented or that we try to implement based also on standards and competencies that are set by the education department or those that will govern our education sector. In our case, DepEd. So in the writing of a curriculum in the classroom, of the implementation of a curriculum, it is therefore highly important for teachers to be able to design a very good and effective lesson plan, because it is through the lesson plan, okay, the single most recognizable document of a curriculum actively implemented on a day-to-day basis, the lesson plan that is. So knowledge of lesson planning, of good and effective lesson planning is necessary for the success of the implementation. We can never implement without something to rely on. And that something that we rely on is the plan, the lesson plan, the teacher-made lesson plan. Now, if you have not forgotten, once you have already aligned the curriculum using the curriculum map, the next process there is the lesson planning process or the lesson planning stage, wherein based on the alignments as prescribed in our curriculum maps, we then develop that curriculum map to digestible units or digestible levels at the classroom context or the classroom situation. And that is the teacher's domain or the teacher's area of expertise in preparing the lesson plan and in carrying out that lesson plan as an actual or taught curriculum. Thus, I assume that you have already that knowledge of lesson planning, since in our subject on Prof Ed 006, we are integrating your skills learned in the principles of teaching course or subject, also with your EdTech or technology in education, as well as your assessment of learning competencies. We are now trying to bring together into one avenue those particular knowledge of learners, of learning styles and strategies, and of testing and assessment techniques to create a well-balanced and highly effective lesson plan. Now, we all know that the organic composition of a lesson plan has five component parts, namely objectives, subject matter, procedure, assessment, and assignment. In any other lesson plan formats or lesson plan derivatives, terms could interchange or terms could be used as an alternate. For instance, instead of objectives, we can use intended learning outcomes or targets. Subject matter could be the content. Procedure could be named activities or learning activities or episodes of learning or instruction. While assessment could be evaluation or testing. And then assignment, homework, agreement, or extended or enrichment tasks. However they are termed or being worded, they are essentially one and the same in this organic or basic structure of a lesson plan. And of course, for Filipino majors, we also have our adapted terms or the Filipino terms. Layunin, paksang aralin, pamamaraan, pagtataya, and takdang aralin. I bet you already know how to write a lesson plan since it has been one of the major outputs in professional education courses or the education subjects, and of course in your specialized or in your majors. First and foremost, we begin with objectives. It's always the start of the lesson plan. The objectives, our learning outcomes, our targets, our goals. Now, creating creating objectives that are effective and efficient will ensure success in our classes. Remember, it is the first item in the lesson plan. Thus, it is the first part of the planning and the writing of the lesson plan. We have to make good objectives because it is from the objectives that what we desire to see at the end will be manifested. Now, we all know that objectives or ang pagsusulat ng mga layunin, it should be under the guidance of these principles. One, objectives must observe higher order thinking skills based, of course, on the revised Bloom's taxonomy, the RBT. I am always assuming that you already know the levels of the revised Bloom's taxonomy and the domains of learning under which the RBT is also related to. Now, who can tell us in exact order from lower to higher order the revised Bloom's taxonomy categories? Let us check your memory. Yes, Mr. Rivas.
Sir,
You were raising your hand?
gaya na
Yes.
raman,
Could you
sir.
enumerate to us? Would you like to answer?
No, sir.
Okay. I thought you were raising your hand. Yes, Miss Lusdok?
Okay, sir. Try, sir. First,
Do not try. I know you know. You should know. You're already third year.
wait lang, sir. May ka nagklase ko. Papunta ka ron. Okay, sir. First is remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, oh, creating, sir.
Are you asking me a question? I thought you
Ano, sir?
had that in
Creating.
assessment in the first sem.
Yes, sir.
You should be familiar by now.
Remember,
You're in third year, and it's a basic knowledge to know the revised Bloom's taxonomy. Because from there, we take off our lessons beginning in the objectives or at the objectives. So it should observe the higher order thinking skills. Of course, we don't discount the lower order because without the lower order, we know that we cannot move higher up. But emphasis on objectives should be most inclined to development of higher order thinking skills, which is, of course, in RBT, creation or creating stage. But if you're going to hone also and develop the lower order thinking skills, the knowledge level skills, then it's not just simply knowledge as knowledge because the levels of knowledge could be further divided into four: factual, conceptual, procedural, and metacognitive knowledge. Now, who among you here can still remember the differences of these four levels of knowledge, from factual to metacognitive? Yes, who wants to give it a shot to differentiate these levels of knowledge? Rivas, again, you're raising your hand, or is it already automatically pressed? Who can differentiate the four, or at least give a description of the four? Or do you know these four? Maybe I should ask first. Do you know what procedural knowledge is compared to metacognitive knowledge? Mr. Pongos, would you like to share anything that you know about the four levels of knowledge? Mm-hmm. Nobody here knows what these four are, at least one or two of the terms.
Sir,
Yes.
try.
Oh, yes, you can
Upward
try.
knowledge,
You can also
upward
try.
knowledge, involved knowledge, sir.
So what is that? So what's with that factual knowledge and what was that again?
Involved knowledge.
So what is the connection between the involved knowledge and factual knowledge? Rio, are you raising your hand? Haven't you encountered this one in assessment in the first semester? Levels of knowledge? Wala?
Sir, apply the comprehension of the student.
What is that about? Is it on factual knowledge?
I think, sir.
You think, but I think you're not sure. Anyway, I hope you are refreshed when I will say that this is part of the first few um, skill to differentiate the levels of knowledge, especially in assessment, because when we are trying to test or when we are trying to develop assessment strategies or techniques, we should be able to differentiate those levels, of course, with the help of the revised Bloom's taxonomy. And aside from the revised Bloom's taxonomy, we also subscribe to um, the levels of knowledge. In fact, we also have the use of Edward Gagne's declarative and procedural knowledge. Okay? Factual knowledge, of course, refers to items of memory, okay? Facts, data. When we talk about conceptual knowledge, it talks about the connection between, okay, common ideas or threading what's common between presented ideas to form a concept. Procedural knowledge is knowledge of doing things, of processes, of steps. While metacognitive knowledge is about knowing how you know or thinking how you think, or trying to analyze the way you are thinking, the way you are trying to process information that will serve as your knowledge. So I hope that is clear to you, because when we try to create activities, we also try to develop which levels of knowledge, and in the assessment, what particular levels in the revised Bloom's taxonomy we are able to, okay, develop, or we are able to, okay, master. And of course, objectives must be written following the SMART criteria. I'm sure you know what SMART stands for. What does SMART stand for? What do we mean when we say SMART? Yes, Miss Lesno?
S, sir, stands for specific, M for measurable, A for attainable, R for relatable, then T, time bounded, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, that is actually the SMART criterion for writing objectives. That our objectives that we set in our classes, in our lesson plans, must embody those characteristics or the criteria. Now, what do we mean to say that it's SMART? What does each of the criteria reflect on our objectives? Why do we need it to be specific? S, or R, relatable or realistic, or M, measurable, or T, time bounded, or A, attainable. When we say it's specific, our objectives must possess what particular characteristic of being specific? Yes? Can you give an example? So it will be easier. Could you give an example of an objective, and then please point out the characteristic that is specific in that objective, and why can we say that that particular objective is embodying specific, or the specificity? You can give an example to point out the S in SMART. Who would like to try? Yes, Miss Mijares?
Kaganiha raman na, sir.
Also, you're not raising your hand anymore, so you can press the button again to unraise your hand. Who would like to try? When you say that an objective must be specific, then it should embody a particular, that particular characteristic. So as an example, maybe you can provide an objective that shows being specific. Yes, Miss Magna?
Ay, sir, try lang. Sa specific, you should be specific on your goal or on your discussion. Um, Yung meron kang you should be specific on your discussion kung ano ba talaga yung tatalakayin nyo sa or gaya ng paggawa ng lesson planning. You should be specific.
Yes, of course, in lesson planning, we should be specific. And we're specific because we begin with objectives. Now, when we begin with objectives, how do we make or how do we create an objective as a specific objective? Yes, Mr. Ramirez, any idea?
I'll try, sir. At the end of the session, the student should be able to write a short narrative paragraph that includes elements of setting, characters, and plot, observing the conventions of writing. For me, sir, it is specific because we have given pinpoints or ideas on how the activity should be done. That's why I could consider it as specific.
Okay, so which particular term there actually points to the specificity of the objective? What particular term in your given example really tells us that the objective embodies being specific?
Because I have stated that they should write they should write a narrative paragraph that includes elements of settings, characters, plot, and plot, sir.
Okay, so the key term there is actually the verb, right? Okay, thank you. That's actually an example of a specific, okay, objective. Now, I hope you will all be reminded, especially the third year BSED, of the verbs that we use when we formulate objectives. Remember, we should be stating the outcomes. We are looking into what students can do at the end of the session or at the end of the time period or at the end of a given instructional time. We begin with the end in mind. I hope you remember that in your principles of teaching and also in assessment, because I think you have already created instructional objectives during the first SEM as you tried to create your tests. You cannot create a test without basing it on the learning objectives or the instructional objectives that is done prior to the teaching, prior to the instruction phase. So when you say specific, we always use observable, overt behaviors, something that we can see, something that we know that we can be able to determine. Just as when you say, pagkatapos ng sesyon, ang mag-aaral ay nakasusulat ng isang sanaysay o ng isang talata o ng pangungusap. Nakakasulat is something that you can concretely see, something that can be manifested compared to when you write. Pagkatapos ng sesyon, ang mag-aaral ay nauunawaan ang paksa ng tulang tinalakay o ang tema ng maikling kwento, nauunawaan. How do you see nauunawaan? Can you see nauunawaan? At the end of the lesson, students are able to appreciate the value of the short story. Appreciate. They are verbs. Naunawaan, understand. Nalalaman ang mga motibo ng character sa kwento. Nalalaman, to know. Now, understand, know. Appreciate. Can we see them? How do you know that the students appreciate? How do you know that the students understand? Well, that's the question of, is the verb specific? Diba? So, kumain ka, nakakasulat. O ka na, makita na nako, na anay abot, nakakasulat. Nakakapagbigay ng opinion, nakakapaglahad, report to the class. Or create. Diba? So when you say specific objectives, it must be first and foremost, the verbs must be observable. I think there is a list of the verbs that are observable behaviors per level in the revised Bloom's taxonomy. Don't you have this particular list or chart of the verbs that we can use when we will try to create objectives and to the different levels of the RBT? Do you know these things? Okay. Nagunsa mo sa first sem, mga igsuon. What are your subjects in the first sem? Let me just ask. Miss Losdok, can you enumerate to me the subjects that you had in the first semester for this school year? Or perhaps um, Miss Galiogo, what are your subjects during the first semester? Let me just have an idea of what you have been through in the first semester.
Assessment, sir.
Yes?
Assessment 1, sir.
Assessment 1, what else? You only had assessment? Joanna, Miss Gumanit? Sa inyong mga subject itong first sem? Maski first sem, di mo pakinumdum sa inyong ipangko ang subject? Ay, grabe kayo ah. First time subjects, assessment, ay manimduman. That's why I'm asking because I am wondering why you cannot sort of relate to the present lesson on writing objectives or making objectives. Basin taas sa akong assumption or nag-una ko gamay sa akong assumption that you already know these particular things on writing objectives, observing the SMART criterion, especially in constructing the objectives according to the ABCD. You know the ABCD of instructional objectives? When we construct the instructional objectives, we need to consider the A, audience, B, behavior, C, conditions, and then D, degree of acceptable performance. That's the ABCD. Now, after we construct it with the ABCD format, we then secure and ensure that it is SMART, being specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bounded. Okay, so to better test whether you really know or we still have to work on the objective parts on being smart or characterizing smart objectives, I'll give this practice test on identifying and analyzing objectives. I will be giving a Google Forms link as a sort of practice quiz for a formal quiz on Thursday, our next meeting. Okay, on the Google chat box, there is a Google Forms link. That's a practice quiz on analyzing objectives. There are actually 5 objectives, and you're going to do some sets of activities with those 5 objectives. First, you're going to okay, identify okay, those objectives. You're going to identify them according to their SMART criterion or characteristics. You're going to put a check whether each objective possesses SMART. If you think they possess all the SMART characteristic, you check all of them, or you only check which applies to each of the objectives. In the next portion, you're going to identify the level of the objective in terms of the revised Bloom's taxonomy. And then the last portion is that you're going to identify the domain that represents or that is represented by the objective. Is it cognitive, affective, or psychomotor? This is a sort of review or diagnostic assessment on your knowledge of the objectives. Because on Thursday, I shall be giving a similar quiz, but with, of course, using the Filipino curriculum or the curriculum guide for Filipino to set the objectives. So please take that diagnostic assessment on analyzing objectives. I'll be giving you 15 minutes. I think 15 minutes is generous enough for you to accomplish this practice quiz. Okay, time's up. I will be closing the acceptance of the responses from the Google Forms. So how did you find the diagnostic assessment for analyzing objectives? Was it easy analyzing objectives? Do you think it will be easier to write objectives than to analyze them? What do you think so?
Medyo hard siya sir kay Tagalog mo namong na andan.
So it's hard to analyze objectives because they're in English. But do you know what SMART means, correct? Am I right?
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. Wa man lagi ito ba ganihang pangutana kung sa meaning sa SMART? The important thing is not the language that we are trying to analyze. It's the concept of the objectives. Whether it's in English or Filipino, if you know what SMART means or the levels in the revised Bloom's taxonomy clearly delineates, even if it's MAPE or any subject matter objective that I will give you can be able to analyze. Because once you grasp the concept, remember that's the conceptual knowledge, you're able to piece through whatever ideas there are and then try to look at and then apply in the procedural knowledge in the context of procedural those certain concepts learned that can be done or applied. Okay, now let's go over these objectives. So I will expect by next meeting, because I will use the Filipino as the core of the objectives, then you will get higher scores than this. Is that the other way of saying it around? The objectives here are harder to analyze because they're in English or in other subject areas. Well, let's try Filipino next meeting. So given a standard balance beam raised to a standard height, the student will be able to walk the entire length of the beam steadily without falling off within 6 seconds. Now, here's the key. It's a SMART objective. It's specific. When we say specific, we have to look at the verb. Now, what is the verb there? What is the overt behavior? And so my verb din ha. The verb is actually the
Walk.
performance or what is tested or what will be tested. Walk. It's highlighted in green because walk is the behavior. In the ABCD, walk is B. What is the A in the ABCD of instructional objectives?
Students.
Of course, students, the audience. Kabalo man lagi mo unsay ano ito ba ganiha? I'm expecting the third year to be already, if not good, will have a sense of competence. Now, it's smart because it's specific and it's measurable. Now, why do we consider this a measurable objective? Why is this measurable?
Concern ay condition.
Na ay condition, bantog measurable siya, Mel. Okay, you're talking about condition. What is the condition there?
Na if mahulog sila ay dapat within 6 seconds dapat dili sila mahulog, sir.
So within 6 seconds without falling off is the condition. Are you sure? What is
I mean,
condition,
sir,
by the way?
Sir, oh, kay naman siya time frame, sir.
Because there is a time frame and there is a condition. Are you very, very sure about that? Unsa din ang condition of learning? Unsa na conditions of learning sa ABCD?
I mean, sir, kanang measurable sa kay ma-measure nay kanang nay basihan kung dili mabuhat naa
Okay,
siya kanang
condition. Okay, don't talk about condition.
Consequences, sir.
We talk about the degree. The degree of acceptable behavior is that when the students can walk without falling off. Now, without falling off within 6 seconds, that's actually the measure. The measure of accomplishing that verb, which is walking. Correct. Now, condition is actually what are provided or what might not be provided to the students. So, kung sa ABCD na siya, ang condition kanang ay underline din ha. Given standard beam. Gamit ang beam, dito maglakaw ang estudyante. Kaya kung wala tong beam, asa mo siya maglakaw? Sa alambre. Diba? That's a condition. The degree is the highlighted in pink or peach. So it's specific because you can see, walk. No? Makita man mo nang naglakaw. It can be measured because there is a degree and the verb is measurable. No? The time limit makes it measurable. It's also attainable because it can be done by the students as performance of their competency. Is it realistic, relatable? Of course, because probably this objective is a MAPE objective, obviously. Part of their physical education and development. Is it time-bounded? There is a time element. Dili man na maabtan sa sunod semana. Because a student will walk the entire length of the beam without falling off within 6 seconds or within how many minutes if you allow. So it's smart completely. And looking at the RBT, the revised Bloom's taxonomy, it is applying. It's applying the learned concept of walking straight on a line on the balance beam, because it shows that you have posture, you have balance, you have what it takes, the physical conditions or the ability to do or perform the walk on the beam. And clearly, it is a psychomotor domain, or it's representative of psychomotor domain. Klaro ba karon? Once we have looked into this objective, are you given an idea that, okay, this is how we're going to look at objectives? Now, in the second objective, at the end of the session, learners are expected to create a dance drama based on selected musical pieces from the Baroque period. It only has very few characteristics without A, without T. Now, why do you think this does not possess attainability and time boundedness? Why can we consider them lacking of the two? Yes, Mr. Ramirez?
Simply because of the fact, sir, that the given example does not have a specific deadline. That's why we cannot say that it is time bounded. And as for attainability, for the students would have, a harder time to actually create the, the idea of the dance drama itself because of the type of music, the genre of the genre, and that's sir.
Okay, yes, it is not time bounded, but uh, considering that the time element he given here is only at the end of the session, which is actually impractical. There is already a deadline, remember, at the end of the session. But looking into the context of at the end of the session, meaning before the session will end, they will be able to create a dance drama. Now, is that possible? We look at now, it is specific, create a dance drama. It can be measured because it's a presentation. It's realistic because performance tasks are authentic tasks. But can it be done at the end of the session? How many sessions are we talking about? Are we just talking about 1 hour session? Is it about after a week? After discussing Baroque music? So that becomes the impossibility. You cannot just say at the end of the session they can create. You don't expect students to create an output such as a performance by just 1 or 2 sessions. It will take time. It will take time for a performance task to be accomplished. That's why it lacks attainability and time boundedness. And as for the level in the RBT, of course, it's under creation or creating. Creating, and it's psychomotor because it's a dance presentation, dance drama. Now, in the third objective, learners should be able to list down precautionary measures that one should do during an earthquake at the end of a safety drill. List down measures that one should do, okay, after or at the end of an safety drill. Now, it possesses almost all of the criterion or characteristic except for being relatable or realistic. Why is it not R? Why is it not R? Anybody else? Ano hindi man siya realistic? It's all of SMAT but not R. Why so?
Sir, kay di ka ng unpredictable man ang earthquake, sir.
So unpredictable ang earthquake, bantog di siya realistic? Is that so?
I mean, dili na to hold ang panahon, sir, if kanusa mo appear ang earthquake. So,
That's why
bantog
we,
dili na
we
to siya.
include in our curriculum disaster preparedness. That's why it's part of their lesson or competency to be achieved. Disaster readiness and risk reduction. You should know that, Joanna, you're one of the students with DRR, right? In gas.
Sorry, sir.
Hmm. Dili siya realistic because, yes, Mr. Ramirez? Oh, yes, Joanna. Gumanit.
try lang sir, dili siya realistic kay tungod di man siya pwede nga during sa earthquake na ay isa nga mag-list down kung sa mga precautionary measures.
Because, the Chris Aquino, because, bakit hindi siya maglilista?
Because dapat safety first man sir. So, dapat tanan sa during earthquake mag-proceed gid kung asa ang area nga safety ang tanan.
Okay, you're around the idea. It's correct. We're talking about the objectives in the class. Ay, sa mo kuno nga naglinog. Remember, what we are trying to do in the classroom is that we recreate authentic tasks that will be applied to the real world sa makatotohanang paraan sa totoong buhay. Na naghimo naman mo og earthquake drill or safety drill. So, given, condition man na siya no, at the end of the drill, at the end of the workshop on disaster readiness. Pangutanan nato unsa ano to pag-test, unsa ano to pag-check kung nakabalo ba ang bata sa katong gipang demonstrate dito sa taga CDRRMC or sa taga Red Cross sa badiha first aid. Ang pangutana, how do we know that they know? How do we measure? Di ba? How do we check? So ang pangutana, pagkahuman lugar ko naghatag ko og drill. Okay, nagpa-quiz lugar dayon si Sir CDRRMC kinsay CDRRMC karon diya nga head. Nagpa-quiz lugar din siya. Okay, number 1 to 10, enumerate correctly in correct order. What are you going to do? Blah, blah, blah. Is that practical? Is that realistic? Di ba kung sige pahimo kung naay mga earthquake drill, kung sige napahimo? Di ba kato? Duck cover hold. Adto din dito sa ground, sa area, designated evacuation area or safe zone. Di ba? Inanatong ginahimo, Joanna? Oh, so kung gusto nato na i-test, ato bang ipa-enumerate? Get 1/4? O ilista tanan ang mga steps? Is that practical to do? The realistic thing to do?
Yes, sir.
Yes? Are you saying yes, Mel?
Ay, yes, sir. Di ba kanang ipa-enumerate?
Kung pa-enumerate, pwede man ipa-enumerate, Mel, pero kung sa actual galinog, Mel, kung maglinog karon simba ko lang, knock on wood, magkuha ka kag papel, Mel, na maglista din ka sa step 1, 2, 3.
Ah.
Dili, di ba? Makalimot na magay siguro ka magkuha papel o makalimot na magay siguro kag unsa imong buhaton. Magdaambak magay siguro ka o magdagan-dagan simbak ko. So unsa may tsada himundan na? Why don't we let the students simulate? Perform. Demonstrate. Di ba? Di mo say, okay class, kung naglinog, what are you going to do? O, duck cover hold, sir. Daganin ko sa ubos. Okay, timean ta mo ha, within 1 minute na naman sa ubos. Meaning, pag naka-perform ang bata dito, na-prepare na to siya nga simba ko. Kung mahitabo na yung mga disaster, kabalo dito nga kabalo siya, kay nakitaan man nato ang nag-perform. Because this objective must be a performance task. Pwede naman siya ipalista. No? Traditional pen and paper test, but it's not effective. Okay, for example, teacher ko niyo sa TLE, no, cooking. Nagtudlo ko og cooking na unya akong exam din sa inyo kay ipalista ra mo sa ingredients. Okay ra ba na? Is that something realistic? Di ba kung nagtudlo ko og cooking sa inyo or nagtudlo ko og arts, di man ako mo question nga, number 1, what is the ingredient? Number 2, how many cups? I will let you cook. Ipaluto ta mo, ipa-drawing ta mo, ipasayaw ta mo, so that I will know. And that becomes authentic, and that becomes realistic. Okay, so that's why this objective is not realistic because the task that is given is just number one, plainly remembering, and it's a cognitive level, and it does not make the students perform something authentic that they can apply into real life. Okay, so objective number 4. I hope you got that with objective number 3. Nakakalinawan ba tayo sa objective na yon?
Yes, sir.
Okay, objective number 4. It is expected that students will be able to tell the difference between statements that are based on facts and those that are based or that are not after the discussion. If you notice, we just have the audience and then the behavior. And it does not have the first two characteristics, S and M. Why do you think it's not specific and not measurable?
Okay, wala nakabutang sir kung asa mag-base sa mga statements or asa nga discussion.
Sa asa nga discussion, pati pang discussion nato is about opinion at katotohanan. Why is it not specific? Remember, if it's not specific and measurable, we are talking about the verb. And what is the verb there?
Expected.
Expected is the verb, Mel?
Tell. Tell.
Tell. Okay, tell. Tell the difference. Now, why is telling the difference not a specific or not a measurable outcome statement? Okay, when you tell the difference, how do you tell the difference? It's still vague. Tell is a verb that is not overt in terms of objective. Maybe you can use identify statements, label statements. Kung ma-identify, o di, check or X. Kung mag-label, katotohanan, no? O opinion, fact or opinion, kana, klaro na siya nga action. Kana, mas ma-measure na nimo. Label the statements. O, syempre, mag-label siya. Pila ka statements mong ihatag, yung i-label. Kanang tell the difference, mahibawan niya, unsa ano to pagkahibalo nga nakabalo siya, kana kung maka-label na, kana kung maka-identify, kana kung maka-match. So, kana mga active verbs of overt behavior, mga verbs. That will make the objective specific and measurable. And this objective is at the analysis level or analyzing level in the RBT. And this is, of course, cognitive in the domain. And the fifth one, okay, the longer it is, I think it's clear. Given two cartoon characters of their choice, students will be able to list 5 major personality traits of each of the two characters, combine these to form a composite character, and develop a short storyboard for a cartoon that illustrates 3 of the 5 composited traits. You can see its audience in yellow, the verb, the behavior in green, the condition is underlined, and of course, the degree of acceptable performance is in peach or light pink. So, klaro man kaayo nga smart. It's specific. Unsay angay buhaton? First is to list down, from the listing down to the combination, and to developing and creating the storyboard. Can it be measured? Of course, because they will create a storyboard that is something that they can perform and present rather. Mag-submit man sila, anak. Is it attainable? Of course, it's attainable. The tasks here from the verbs or the actions that they will do is something that the student at the grade level can produce, can provide. It's realistic. Creating a short storyboard or a comic strip is something that can be done in a real life setting, is something that is there outside the school environment. They do sketching, they do conversations. Is it time bounded? It's time bounded because even if walay gibutang diha nga, at the end of the lesson, at the end of the 1 hour period, dili masag ka maabtan og isa ka tuig makahimo og inana nga task. Therefore, it is within a reasonable amount of time given that this is a task-based objective. And from the analysis of this objective, it is a creating objective based on the RBT. And this is more likely to show the affective domain because choosing a character and then choosing from the characters a unique characteristic that will be embodied in a storyboard is something that involves responding and valuing, and they are part of affective domain. Are these things clear now in terms of the objective assessment or analysis of objective? When you are able to analyze objectives this way, because of the criterion, the SMART, and of course the ABCD, then there's no reason for you not to create or develop very good and effective objectives. We are just at the first phase, objective phase. Remember, the lesson plan as a document of a written curriculum has 4 other parts left. But we place this as the first one because it is most important. So on Thursday, we will have a quiz. Not some, but the format will be the same. Analyze first in terms of SMART. Next will be in terms of the levels in RBT, and then the domains of learning. And we shall be using the Filipino curriculum or the subject area. Yes, any question, Mr. Ramirez? Any question or clarification? You're raising your hand. Mr. Ramirez, would you like to ask something, or anyone would like to ask something?
Sir, it's about the quiz, sir. It's so the language going to be used is Filipino, sir.
Because the core curriculum for the BSED is Filipino for your class. Would you like me to create a separate quiz for you? Okay. We'll try English with you because you're BSED English. But for the rest of the class, it will be in Filipino since they are BSED Filipino and 99% of the class is or are Filipino majors. And by the way, let me just clarify. You are belonging to Block A, right? But why is it that I have seen you yesterday in the Block B Google Meet? I think you're part of Block A. Am I correct?
Sir, I think, sa'yo manata to?
Yes, and also in the group chats, you should belong only to Block A. If you're still in the Block B, please kindly remove yourself from that. You can leave that Block B group chat. Anyway, you belong to the Block A group.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you can also attend only the Block A sessions because the Block B and Block A sessions are simultaneous, I mean, continuously the same. So it might be I don't know, taxing on your part to attend both classes if you have free time, but you can just do that on other requirements or other tasks that you have in your other subjects as well. Okay, any other questions? Clarifications? Okay, if there is none, then
Wala na, sir.
let's call it a day. It's already evening. I hope you are doing well, and please keep safe and always look forward to better and brighter days ahead of us. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir.